Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. The Greens are furious, and so whatever's happened to make them furious must be a good thing. And indeed it is, and we've got to say that the SNP finally got something right. It's, I know, stunning. The Saturday girl had to get up and tell Parliament, and including the Greens, that the highly protected marine area legislation was being abandoned. This was something the Greens were very keen on, although no one knows why. They just picked an arbitrary figure and said, we'll call it 10%. And where should we do it? Oh, who cares? Just randomly pick some places. And you're not allowed to fish there for a year or something. Madness. No scientific basis. It's just something that sounded good and that they wanted to push through. Anyway, the SNP have had such a backlash that even they, who normally just ignore backlashes, have retreated. They've said, no, we're not doing it. Because finally, and I think there is a bigger power play, going on here. But finally, they've relented and they're abandoning it. And like I say, the Saturday girl had to tell the Greens that it was being kicked into touch. But we'll take a look at this. But I do say, and we will analyse this during it, but I think there's something else. I think there's been a tipping point, there's been an inflection in the relationship. Anyway, here goes. So Scottish Greens left humiliated after SNP government scrap hated fishing ban plans. They didn't come up and say, well, we've had advice from scientists that we need to cut this by 10%, and so, or anything like that. There was none of that. And why 10%? Purely arbitrary, because it sounded like a nice number. And they couldn't even say this area, this area, this area. Well, let's do it where the breeding grounds are. No, they were just doing it in just random. We'll screw that village. They're doing well. Let's destroy their fishing industry. That was literally how they looked at it. It wasn't anything to do with saving fish. It was to do with destroying growth, destroying industry, because that's what the Greens are. They're all Marxists who need to destroy everything as they go along. And of course, people seeing what was happening got up and they were high, mighty angry, and they fought back. And the SNP, have relented. So the SNP executive confirmed that they would no longer be seeking to implement the HPMA, the highly protected marine areas, in 10% of Scottish waters, following a massive outcry from coastal communities. And there she is. Look, I've had to cancel another plan. She had to cancel the report into climate change because she hadn't done her own work, and probably out with boys or something, and so now she's cancelled this. Although it is the right decision, probably not done for the right reasons, but hey. Anyway, the Scottish Greens have been left humiliated after their coalition partners scrapped a key aspect of the Butte House Agreement. Now, they're angry and they're humiliated, but they're not so angry. They're not so humiliated that they're going to give up their seats in government. Oh, no. They've got a long way before that happens. So they'll sit there and seethe, but they're holding on to those seats out of principle. The principle being, we've got power and we want to keep it. Anyway, the Scottish Government confirmed that they had completely binned controversial bans to ban fishing at 10% of seas around Scotland. Victory for common sense again. Called highly protected marine areas, the policy brought about a huge outcry from coastal communities who pointed out that it could be the death knell for many fishermen jobs. And not just the fishermen, of course. You've got the processing, you've got the port staff and things like that. There's all sorts of jobs that go along, transport and distribution, all sorts of jobs that go alongside these things, all the sort of that. Then you have the tertiary industries around, and some of these places, it's the only industry. It brings the money into the community, which is then used around in the shops and bars and things. So it's very, very important. And of course, that's why the Greens want to destroy it, so they can destroy whole communities. It's part of their push to just destroy and make Scotland an entire wasteland. It was a key aspect of the Butte House Agreement, but it's now been scrapped by ministers following widespread criticism. The plans were supported by conservation charities, but opposed by locals, with a protest song by the trad band Skip Inish, comparing the policy to the Highland clearances. And it kind of is, isn't it? It's exactly the kind of thing that was attempting to achieve. Destroy the communities, destroy the economy, destroy Scotland. The Scottish Government has now published consultation responses to the HPMAs following their initial announcement in June that they would go away to look at the policy again. While the analysis shows that more respondents supported them than opposed them, 55 to 43%, this is skewed through a concerted campaign. Yeah, when you're getting people who live in when you're getting people who live in cities miles away from these villages, oh yes, it sounds good, oh yes, must save the fish, save the little fishes, save little fishes. But you ask anyone who's actually concerned with this, and it's 90%, get the fuck out of here. Anyway, a large majority of those in favour have submitted their responses following a push by Environmental Forum, Scottish Environment Link. And if this was removed, as well as campaign responses from other groups, this fell to only 20% in favour and 76% against. And it is that background that even the SNP realised they're screwed if they push this through. The SNP executive found that there was highly polarised views on the subject, which they claim masked a great deal of common ground shared by respondents in relation to the importance of protecting the marine environment and marine ecosystems, as well as the agreement on many aspects of how that may be achieved. Nobody is saying you shouldn't protect the environment. No one is saying you shouldn't protect the fish. You've got to have maintainable supplies, and sometimes it does come to the point where you need to sort of slow down the catch or slow down the rate. But here's a novel idea: get all the foreign boats out of our effing waters and let just the local coastal communities fish in them. And if you got all the Spanish huge industrial trawlers out and the Dutch huge, and say, look, go and fish in your waters. You've got a huge coastline. Go and fish in your waters and leave our waters alone. And there you go. That's what it is. Now, you see, the US Coast Guard, they're an armed force. They're not just a bunch of sad people in boats. The US Coast Guard are actually an armed force. And anyone goes in and fishes in areas of US water without the permits, without being, national. So, for example, if it was a Canadian and he just strayed in by a couple of miles, they'd be there and they'd be pointing guns at those ships, and they do have the power to go on and they'll tip the entire catch over and they can scuttle the ships. They'll pull the people off and scuttle the ships. They do it. We need to start, let's make our Coast Guard an armed force and start doing that and force these ships out of our water at gunpoint if necessary, and that would protect the fish, wouldn't it? No, you can do all that and nobody in Scotland is going to lose their job. Or, I say Scotland, I mean, all up and down, Hull, anywhere there's a major fishing port, Grimsby, all these big fishing ports, no one will lose their jobs, Anyway, the critics of the policy, I was getting down here, critics of the policy welcomed the final confirmation as it was indeed dead. Scottish Tory Shadow Rural Affairs Secretary Rachel Hamilton described it as a victory for our fishermen, who made their views known in no uncertain terms that HPMAs would have destroyed the industry and the coastal communities that they support. And she added, for far too long, SNP ministers failed to engage with the industry over what this effective ban on fishing would have meant, as they bowed to the demands of their extremist Marxist Green partners. And the responses to the consultations show that despite the efforts of a concerted campaign to skew the opinions on these HPMAs, the vast majority of his respondents opposed the plans. And she is absolutely right. The trouble is, they're never honest, are they? They lie, they spin, they push all this, and they'll politicise everything. And the people have said no, and they've had to reverse. When you look at those figures, 20% for, 76% against. Nobody in their right mind, and even the insanest of SNP MPs, must see that there's no way they can adopt this position and do anything other than fail to, just fail again. So they have, by dint of self-preservation, done the right thing. Well done, you. You've finally got there. You've finally done one thing in this entire government's history that's right. Well done. You haven't done it for the right reasons, of course. You've done it for all the wrong reasons. But the result is you've got it right. Well done. Finally. We can all rest easy in our beds. Well, for one day. Anyway, we shall round off and we shall come up. Do you know, it did have to happen one day. Out of just sheer fluke, sheer chance. Eventually, the SNP had to get something right, and finally they have. But as I say, it's all done because of 76%. Ooh, we better not push that one. Even us. If it was closer, maybe. But no, they're not going to do it, are they? Still, the people in these coastal communities will at least be pleased enough to know that they've still got a job and a future. And it's a brave man goes out on a fishing boat, let me tell you. They're only little things, and it's a hard life. So next time you're sitting there and chomping into your fish and chips, be thankful for the bravery of these guys. I know they do it for the money, but even so, it's still not a job I would choose to do. And so why should we take their jobs away just simply because some green extremist thinks, oh, well, we've just got to do something that looks good without any basis in fact or scientific research? They're all dicks, aren't they? Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Very glad news. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and enjoy the fish. Bye.